8 hours. That's how long I drove, replaying every memory of my daughter in my mind. I carried a box beside me, the heart of our family, filled with stories, heirlooms, and love passed down through generations. I thought she'd be proud, maybe even grateful. But when she opened the door, her smile faded, and her voice turned cold. In that moment, I realized something I never wanted to believe. I was no longer a part of her world. Before I dive in, tell me where you're listening from. It always makes me smile seeing how far we all are, yet somehow, right here together. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I'm 65 years old. I've lived my entire life in Atlanta, Georgia, in the same townhouse where my grandmother Ruth raised me after my parents passed. This house has witnessed 4 generations of Carter women, strong, resilient women who knew the value of family, faith, and keeping our roots alive. But today, as I sit here in my kitchen, staring at the empty cedar box on my dining table, I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about motherhood, about love, and about the bonds that are supposed to hold families together. It all started 3 weeks ago when my daughter Danielle called me from Charlotte. Her voice was bubbling with excitement, the kind I hadn't heard since she was a little girl, telling me about her day at school. "Mama, I have news," she said, and I could practically hear her bouncing on the other end of the line. "What is it?" "Baby?" I asked, setting down my sweet tea and giving her my full attention. "Marcus proposed. We're engaged, Mama. Can you believe it?" My heart swelled with joy. Marcus Reed was a good man, a corporate lawyer, well-educated, came from a nice family. I'd met him twice when they visited Atlanta, and he seemed to genuinely care for my daughter. More importantly, he made her happy, and that's all any mother wants. "Oh, Danielle, that's wonderful news, honey. I'm so happy for you both." "We're having an engagement dinner this Saturday," she continued. "It's going to be small, just close family and friends. Marcus's mother, Lydia, is hosting it at their country club in Charlotte. Can you come?" "Of course I'll be there," I said without hesitation. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. That's when I got the idea about the cedar box. The box had been sitting in my bedroom closet for years, waiting for the right moment. It belonged to my great-grandmother Clara May Carter, passed down through our family line. Inside were treasures that told the story of our lineage. Handwritten letters from the 1940s, photographs of ancestors who lived through the Great Migration, a beaded necklace made by Clara May's own hands, and most precious of all, the wedding rings that belonged to Clara May and her husband Henry, who stood together through the civil rights era when love had to be fierce to survive. I spent the entire week preparing. I polished the rings until they gleamed, carefully arranged the photographs, and wrote a letter to Danielle explaining the significance of each item. This wasn't just a collection of old things. This was our heritage, our strength, our story. I wanted her to understand where she came from, to feel connected to the generations of strong women who paved the way for her success. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical October weather in Georgia. I dressed in my best navy dress, the one I wore to church on Easter, and carefully placed the cedar box in my passenger seat like a precious passenger. The drive to Charlotte would take me about 8 hours, but I didn't mind. I was excited, nervous, and filled with anticipation. As I drove north on I-85, watching the Georgia landscape slowly transform into North Carolina countryside, I found myself thinking about Danielle's childhood. She was always my ambitious girl, the one who colored outside the lines and asked questions that made me think. When she was 7, she announced she was going to be a lawyer like the people on TV who helped fix things. When she was 12, she started talking about colleges up north, places with names I could barely pronounce. I supported her dreams, even when they took her further and further away from home. When she got that full scholarship to Duke, I was the proudest mama in all of Atlanta. When she landed her job at that prestigious firm in Charlotte, making more money than I'd ever seen, I bragged to everyone at Mount Olive Baptist Church. But somewhere along the way, I started to feel like I was losing her. The phone calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. When she did come home, she seemed restless, like she was just marking time until she could leave again. She'd make comments about old-fashioned ways and keeping up with the times that made me wonder if she was embarrassed by her raising, by me. Still, I pushed those worries aside. This engagement dinner was going to be different. This was going to be our moment to reconnect, for me to show her that our family's past wasn't something to leave behind, but something to treasure and carry forward. The GPS announced I was approaching Charlotte as the sun began to set. My heart was pounding with excitement as I followed the directions to the address Danielle had given me. The country club was in one of those neighborhoods where the houses looked like they belonged in magazines, all perfect lawns and expensive cars. I pulled up to a beautiful brick house with white columns, the kind of place I'd only seen in movies. Taking a deep breath, I carefully lifted the cedar box and walked to the front door, my heels clicking on the perfect walkway. I rang the doorbell, smoothing my dress one last time. Footsteps approached, and my heart raced with anticipation. The door opened, and there was my daughter, beautiful, elegant, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. But instead of the warm smile I expected, her face went blank. Then something shifted in her expression, something cold and distant that I'd never seen before. "Mom?" she said, her voice flat. "What are you doing here?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm here for your engagement dinner, baby. You invited me, remember?" Danielle glanced over her shoulder, then stepped outside, pulling the door almost closed behind her. "Mom," she said quietly, "that was yesterday." The world seemed to tilt sideways. I stood there on that perfect porch, clutching my great-grandmother's cedar box, trying to process what my daughter had just said. Yesterday. The engagement dinner was yesterday. "But Danielle," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "you said Saturday." "Today is Saturday." She looked at me with a mixture of pity and irritation that cut straight through my heart. "Mom, I said Friday." The dinner was Friday evening. It's over. I felt like I was drowning in confusion. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and scrolled to our text conversation from the week before. There it was, clear as day. Saturday evening, 7 p.m. But as I looked closer, my heart sank. The message thread showed that she had sent a correction the next day. "Actually, Mom, we moved it to Friday. Hope that works for you." How had I missed that? How had I not seen the correction? I didn't see your message about the change, I stammered, feeling smaller by the second. Danielle sighed, the kind of sigh you give a child who's disappointed you. "Mom, you really need to start checking your phone more often." This is exactly what I was worried about. Behind her, I could hear voices and laughter from inside the house. The celebration was continuing without me, had happened without me. I imagined Marcus's family, his mother Lydia, whom I'd never met, all gathering to welcome my daughter into their world, while I drove 8 hours with a box full of stories they'd never hear. Can I still come in?" I asked, hating how pathetic I sounded. "I brought something special for you. Something from our family." Danielle glanced at the cedar box in my hands, then back at my face. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to climb into my lap to hear stories about her great-grandmother, Clara May. But it vanished quickly. "Mom, this is really awkward timing. Marcus's family is here, and his mother has been planning this for weeks. Everyone's already eaten, and we're about to do the gift presentations. It would be weird to explain why you're just showing up now." Each word was like a knife. My own daughter was treating me like an unwelcome stranger, like someone who couldn't be trusted to show up on time or fit in with the right people. "I understand," I said quietly. Though I didn't understand anything at all. I'll head back home." "You drove all this way," she said, and for a second I thought she might invite me in after all. "Why don't you get a hotel room tonight and drive back tomorrow? There's a Hampton Inn about 10 minutes from here. A hotel room." She was suggesting I spend the night alone in a hotel room instead of celebrating with my only child. "What about the box?" I asked, holding it up slightly. "These are family heirlooms, Danielle. Stories about where you come from. I wanted to share them with you and Marcus." She barely glanced at it. "Mom, can we talk about this later? Maybe when you come back for the wedding planning?" "Right now really isn't the time." "The wedding planning. as if I was just another vendor to be scheduled in. When is the wedding? I asked. We're thinking next spring. April, maybe May. We haven't set a date yet. And you'll let me know when you do? Something flickered across her face again, but she nodded. Of course, Mom, you're my mother. Of course you'll be at my wedding. But the way she said it made me feel like I was being granted a favor rather than claiming my rightful place. From inside the house, I heard a woman's voice calling, Danielle, sweetie, are you coming back? We're about to cut the cake. That must be Lydia, Marcus's mother, the woman who got to host my daughter's engagement celebration, who got to be there for the toasts and the laughter and all the moments I had driven 8 hours to share. I need to go back inside, Danielle said. Drive safe, okay? Text me when you get to the hotel. She leaned forward and gave me a quick, perfunctory hug, the kind you give an acquaintance at church. Then she was gone, back inside to her new life, leaving me standing alone on the porch with my box of memories that suddenly felt foolishly heavy. I walked back to my car in a daze. The neighbors' houses glowed warm and golden in the early evening light, filled with families who probably sat down to dinner together every night, who didn't miss important messages, who belonged in their children's lives. As I sat in my car, I felt the tears coming. 8 hours. I had driven 8 hours with my heart full of love and hope, carrying the treasures of our family's past, ready to welcome Marcus into our story. And I had missed it all because of one text message I somehow overlooked. But as I wiped my eyes and started the engine, something else began to bubble up inside me alongside the hurt and embarrassment. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, not since I was young and had to fight for respect in a world that didn't always value what I had to offer. It was anger, not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, steady kind that comes when you realize you've been underestimated, dismissed, treated as less than you are, the kind my grandmother Ruth used to get when someone suggested she didn't belong somewhere she had every right to be. I drove to the Hampton Inn in silence, the cedar box beside me like a faithful companion. Tomorrow I would drive back to Atlanta, but something had changed in those few minutes on Danielle's porch. Something that was going to reshape everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my daughter. The desk clerk was kind, a young black woman who reminded me a little of Danielle at that age. As I checked in, she noticed the beautiful cedar box I was carrying. That's gorgeous, she said. Family heirloom? Yes, I replied, my voice stronger than it had been all evening. Yes, it is. I didn't sleep well that night. The hotel room was clean and comfortable, but it felt like a prison. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying that moment on the porch, seeing the look in Danielle's eyes when she realized I was there. Not surprise, not joy, just inconvenience. Around midnight, I got up and sat by the window, looking out at the Charlotte skyline. The cedar box sat on the small table beside me, and I found myself opening it, touching each precious item inside. There was Clara May's beaded necklace, each bead carefully strung by hand during the long evenings when she worked as a seamstress to support her family. The wedding rings, simple gold bands that had weathered decades of struggle and triumph. The photographs, my great-grandmother as a young woman, my grandmother Ruth in her Sunday best, pictures of family gatherings where love filled every corner of the frame. And there was my own addition to the collection, a letter I had written to Danielle explaining the significance of each piece, telling her the stories that connected her to generations of strong women who had fought for everything she now took for granted. I picked up my phone and started typing a text to her. I'm sorry I missed your message about the date change. I hope you had a beautiful evening. I love you. I stared at those words for a long time before deleting them. Why was I apologizing? I had driven 8 hours to celebrate her engagement. I had brought treasures from our family's past to share with her and her future husband. Yes, I had missed one text message, but her response had been so cold, so dismissive. Instead, I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. The next morning, I packed up slowly, in no hurry to begin the long drive back to Atlanta. As I loaded the cedar box back into my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. Hope you found a nice hotel. Drive safe today. Love you, love you. 2 words that should have warmed my heart, but somehow felt hollow coming through a text message after everything that had happened. I started the drive home with a heavy heart, but as the miles passed, my mind began to clear. I thought about my grandmother Ruth, who had raised me with firm love and high expectations. She never would have accepted being treated as an afterthought, even by her own family. I thought about Clara May, who had sewn late into the night to provide for her children, who had faced down discrimination and hardship with dignity and strength. What would she think of her great-great-granddaughter dismissing the sacrifices and struggles that had paved the way for her success? Somewhere outside of Atlanta, I made a decision. I pulled over at a rest stop and called my best friend, Sarah Jenkins. We had known each other since childhood, had raised our children together, had supported each other through everything life had thrown our way. Evelyn? How did the engagement dinner go? Sarah's voice was warm and excited. It went exactly like you'd expect, I said, and then I told her everything. The missed text message, Danielle's cold reception, the hotel room, the long night of thinking. That girl has lost her mind, Sarah said when I finished. You drove 8 hours, with family heirlooms, and she couldn't even invite you in? She said it would be awkward. Awkward? Baby, what's awkward is treating your mother like she's some random person who showed up uninvited. That child needs a reality check. I don't know what to do, Sarah. I feel like I'm losing her. You're not losing her. She's just gotten too big for her britches, thinks she's too good for where she came from. But blood is blood, and eventually, she's going to need to remember that. Sarah's words stayed with me as I drove the rest of the way home. When I pulled into my driveway in Atlanta, I sat in my car for a few minutes, looking at my townhouse. It wasn't fancy like the places in Charlotte, but it was filled with love, with history, with the warmth of generations of women who had known what really mattered. Inside, I placed the cedar box back on my dining room table and made myself a cup of tea. The house felt different somehow, quieter, but also more peaceful. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about when Danielle would call or when she would visit. I wasn't planning my conversations around what might or might not offend her new sensibilities. That evening, I called my sister Patricia in Birmingham. She was 3 years younger than me, had 2 sons who lived nearby and visited every Sunday for dinner. How's my successful niece doing? She asked after we'd caught up on family news. That's actually why I'm calling, I said, and I told her the whole story. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. You know, Evelyn, sometimes our children have to learn the hard way that family isn't something you can just replace with country club friends and corporate connections. But what if she doesn't learn? What if this is just who she is now? Then you love her anyway, but you don't chase her. You don't diminish yourself trying to fit into a life where you're not valued. You remember who you are and where you come from, and you live that truth. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the photographs and memories that filled every corner of my home. I thought about the letter I had written to Danielle, still sitting in the cedar box, unread. I thought about all the stories I'd wanted to share about our family's strength and resilience. Maybe she wasn't ready to hear those stories yet. Maybe she needed to discover for herself what it meant to be connected to something bigger than career success and social status. But when she was ready, the stories would be here, waiting for her. Your support truly keeps me going. And if you'd like to be a source of inspiration for others too, give this story a like and subscribe. Together, we can reach and help even more people. I made myself dinner that night, mac and cheese with cornbread, the kind of comfort food that connected me to my roots. As I ate, I realized something had shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was tempered now with something else. Resolve. I was Evelyn Carter, granddaughter of Ruth Carter, great-granddaughter of Clara May Carter. I came from women who didn't beg for respect. They commanded it through their actions, their dignity, their unwavering sense of self-worth. It was time I started acting like their descendant. 3 weeks passed without a word from Danielle. No call to check if I had made it home safely, no text asking about the family heirlooms I had brought, no mention of wedding plans or dates. The silence stretched between Atlanta and Charlotte like a canyon I wasn't sure how to cross. I filled my days with the routines that had sustained me for years. Sunday service at Mount Olive Baptist, where Pastor Williams always asked about Danielle with genuine warmth. Tuesday evening Bible study with the Women's Auxiliary. Thursday afternoons, volunteering at the community center, helping seniors navigate their Medicare paperwork. But something had changed in how I talked about my daughter. When Sister Morrison asked how the engagement dinner went, I simply said, "It was lovely." Danielle looked beautiful. I didn't elaborate, didn't share the hurt or the confusion. Some wounds were too fresh to expose to even well-meaning friends. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening in November, my phone rang. Danielle's name appeared on the screen, and my heart jumped despite everything. She was still my child after all. "Hi, Mama," she said, her voice carrying that bright, professional tone she used when she wanted something. "Hello, sweetheart. How are you?" "I'm good, busy with work. Marcus and I have been looking at venues for the wedding. We found this amazing place, the Chatham Estate. It's this gorgeous historic mansion with gardens and everything. Very elegant." I waited for her to mention a date, to ask my opinion, to include me in the planning somehow. Instead, she continued with details about catering and flowers and guest lists, talking at me rather than with me. "That sounds beautiful," I said when she finally paused. "The thing is, Mama, it's pretty expensive, more than we originally budgeted for." There it was. The reason for the call. How much more? Well, the venue alone is $30,000, and with catering and flowers and everything else, we're looking at around $75,000 total. I nearly choked on my tea. $75,000. That was more than I made in 2 years at the insurance office where I worked part-time. That's quite a bit of money, Danielle. I know, but Mama, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Marcus's family has certain expectations, and I want everything to be perfect. I want you to be proud of me. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. She wanted me to be proud while simultaneously making it clear that my opinions didn't matter in the planning process. "I'm always proud of you, baby. But what are you asking me exactly?" There was a pause. "Well, I know you've been saving money for years. You always said that money was for something special, for family. And this is special, isn't it? Your only daughter's wedding? My savings. The money I had accumulated over decades of careful budgeting, skipping vacations, buying generic groceries, driving my old Honda until it couldn't run anymore. The money I had always imagined would help Danielle buy her first house or support her if she ever faced hard times. "How much do you need?" I asked quietly. "If you could help with $25,000, that would cover the venue and give us some cushion for the other expenses." $25,000. More than half of everything I had saved. That's a lot of money, Danielle. I know, and I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Marcus's mother is already contributing, and his father is paying for the honeymoon. I just need my family to step up too. Step up. As if I hadn't been stepping up her entire life. Paying for dance lessons and school supplies and college application fees. Working extra hours to make sure she had everything she needed. Can I think about it? Of course. But we need to put down a deposit soon to hold the date. Can you let me know by this weekend? After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the cedar box that still sat on my dining room table. $25,000 for one day, for a wedding where I would probably be seated at the back, treated like an obligatory guest rather than the mother of the bride. I thought about Clara May, who had gotten married in her best dress in the front room of her mother's house. The celebration had lasted 3 days, with neighbors bringing food and music and laughter. The whole community had gathered to bless the union, to support the young couple as they started their life together. I thought about my own wedding to Danielle's father, James. We had saved for 2 years to afford a small reception at the church fellowship hall. My dress cost $60 from Sears, and we served fried chicken and potato salad that my aunts had made. But it was beautiful because it was ours, because it was filled with people who loved us. James had left when Danielle was 8, couldn't handle the responsibility of being a father and husband. I had raised her alone, working 2 jobs some years to make sure she never felt like she was missing anything. I had sacrificed and saved and gone without so she could have opportunities I never had, and now she was asking me to fund a wedding that cost more than most people's cars. That night, I called Sarah. $25,000? She gasped. For one party? It's her wedding, Sarah. It's supposed to be special. Special doesn't have to mean expensive, and you know it. That girl is getting caught up in trying to impress people who probably wouldn't give her the time of day if she wasn't marrying into their family. But what if I say no? What if this damages our relationship even more? Evelyn, honey, what relationship? When's the last time she called you just to talk? When's the last time she asked about your life, your health, your happiness? You're already being treated like a bank account instead of a mother. Sarah's words stung because they were true. But Danielle was my only child, my baby. How could I risk losing her completely? What would your grandmother Ruth do? Sarah asked gently. I knew the answer immediately. Ruth would have looked Danielle in the eye and told her that family wasn't about how much money you could spend on a party. Family was about respect, about loyalty, about remembering where you came from and honoring the people who helped you get where you were going. But I wasn't Ruth. I was just a mother who loved her daughter and was afraid of losing her. Forever. I need to think about this some more. I told Sarah, you do that. But remember, you raised that girl to be strong and independent. Maybe it's time she learned to stand on her own 2 feet instead of expecting you to catch her every time she reaches too high. The weekend deadline Danielle had given me came and went. I didn't call her back. Instead, I spent Saturday morning in my garden, pulling weeds and thinking about the choices that had brought me to this moment. My phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages, but I ignored them. Sunday, I went to church as usual, sitting in the third pew on the left where my family had sat for 3 generations. Pastor Williams preached about the parable of the prodigal son, and I found myself wondering who the prodigal was in my story. Monday morning, I finally looked at my messages. Mama, I haven't heard from you about the wedding deposit. Did you get my voicemail? The venue is holding the date until Wednesday, but then we have to decide. Mama, please call me back. I'm getting worried. I really need an answer today. I set the phone down and made myself breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs and grits and bacon. The kind of meal that reminded me I was worth taking time for. As I ate, I thought about a conversation I'd had with my grandmother Ruth when I was pregnant with Danielle. Baby, she had said, her hands resting on my swollen belly. The hardest part of being a mama isn't giving birth. It's knowing when to hold on and when to let go. At the time, I thought she was talking about scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. I never imagined she meant something like this. My phone rang. Danielle again. This time, I answered, Mama. Thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you for days, I know. I've been thinking. And? Can you help us with the venue? We really need to put down the deposit today. I took a deep breath. Danielle, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Okay. When you were planning this engagement dinner, did you really want me there? There was silence on the other end of the line. What do you mean? Of course I wanted you there. You're my mother. But when I showed up a day late, you couldn't find a way to include me. You sent me to a hotel room rather than introduce me to Marcus's family. Mama, that was different. The timing was all wrong, and it would have been awkward. Awkward for who, Danielle? Awkward for you? Because you were embarrassed of me? That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you invited me to Charlotte? When's the last time you brought Marcus to Atlanta to see where you grew up? When's the last time you asked about my life instead of just calling when you need something? The silence stretched between us like a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. I've been busy with work and the engagement. You've been busy for 2 years, baby. Ever since you moved to Charlotte and started working at that fancy law firm. Mama, I don't understand why you're bringing all this up now. I thought we were talking about the wedding. We are talking about the wedding. I'm trying to understand if I'm being invited as your mother or as your bank account. I heard her sharp intake of breath. That's a horrible thing to say, is it? You haven't asked my opinion about the venue, the date, the guest list, or anything else. The only time you call is to ask for money. So tell me, Danielle, what role am I supposed to play in this wedding? You're my mother. Of course you have a role. What role? Sitting quietly in the back while Marcus's family takes center stage? Smiling and nodding while you plan a celebration that costs more than most people make in a year? Writing a check and staying out of the way? That's not... I never said... But she couldn't finish the sentence because we both knew it was true. I brought you something that night in Charlotte, I said quietly. Something special from our family. Do you even remember what it was? A box. Some old family things. As if Clara May's wedding rings were just clutter. As if the photographs of our ancestors were just paper. As if the stories of our strength and survival meant nothing. Those weren't just old things, Danielle. That was our history, our legacy, the story of where you come from and who you are. Mama, I appreciate family history, but I'm trying to build my own life now. Build your own life? Or build someone else's idea of what your life should look like? What's that supposed to mean? It means I raised you to be proud of who you are, not to be ashamed of where you came from. It means I taught you that family matters more than money, that character matters more than connections. I do believe those things. Do you? Because right now, it seems like you're more concerned with impressing Marcus's family than honoring your own. There was a long pause. When Danielle spoke again, her voice was tight with anger. So you're not going to help with the wedding? I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? I looked at the cedar box sitting on my dining room table, at the photographs of strong women who had never apologized for who they were. I'm saying that if you want my help, you need to ask me as your mother, not as your bank account. You need to include me in this wedding as family, not just as a check writer. And you need to remember that the woman who raised you deserves better than to be treated like an afterthought. Mama, I'm not finished. You have until Friday to decide what kind of relationship you want with me. If you want a mother who will support your dreams and be part of your life, I'm here. But if you just want someone to fund your fantasies without asking questions, you'll need to look elsewhere. I hung up before she could respond. Tuesday passed in silence. Wednesday brought a brief text. Mama, can we talk? I'm confused about what you want from me. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I spent the day at the community center, helping Mrs. Patterson fill out forms for her prescription assistance program. She was 83, had raised 6 children on her own after her husband died in Vietnam, and never once complained about her circumstances. You seem troubled today. Evelyn, she said, as we finished the paperwork. Just some family issues. Mrs. Patterson. She studied my face with the wisdom that comes from 8 decades of living. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who take us for granted. They think we'll always be there no matter how they treat us. And what do you do about that? You teach them different, not with anger but with boundaries. You show them what respect looks like by requiring it. Thursday evening, I was arranging flowers from my garden when my phone rang. Not Danielle this time, but Marcus. Mrs. Carter? This is Marcus Reed, Danielle's fiancé. His voice was formal, respectful. Hello, Marcus. How are you? I'm well, thank you. I was hoping I could speak with you about the situation with Danielle. She's been very upset since your conversation on Monday. I see. Mrs. Carter, I want you to know that I have tremendous respect for you. Danielle talks about you all the time, about how you raised her on your own, how hard you worked to give her opportunities. I hope you know how much she loves you. I set down my pruning shears and gave him my full attention. I'm glad to hear that, Marcus. But love isn't just words, it's actions. I agree completely. And I think there might be some misunderstanding about the wedding planning. Danielle didn't mean to exclude you. My mother can be overwhelming when it comes to social events. She has very specific ideas about how things should be done. And what are your ideas about how things should be done? He was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I think a wedding should be about bringing families together, not showing off for society people. Some of my happiest memories are from simple family gatherings where everyone felt welcome. That's a wise perspective for a young man to have. My grandmother taught me that. She always said that fancy doesn't mean better, just more expensive. I found myself smiling for the first time all week. Your grandmother sounds like a smart woman. She was. Mrs. Carter, would it be possible for me to come to Atlanta this weekend? I'd like to meet with you properly, to talk about how we can make this wedding something that honors both families. What does Danielle think about that? She doesn't know I'm calling. This is my idea. I love your daughter, Mrs. Carter, but I can see that she's gotten caught up in trying to impress my family instead of being true to herself. I fell in love with the woman who told me stories about her grandmother's strength, not someone trying to fit into my mother's social circle. Friday afternoon. Marcus arrived at my front door carrying a small bouquet of yellow roses and wearing a nervous smile. He was taller than I remembered, with kind eyes and the sort of handshake that spoke of good raising. Thank you for agreeing to see me, Mrs. Carter. Call me Miss Evelyn. Come on in. I made sweet tea and cornbread, and we sat at my kitchen table like civilized people. He looked around at the photographs covering my walls, the quilts my grandmother had made, the cedar box still sitting on the dining room table. This house has so much history, he said. You can feel the love in it. 4 generations of Carter women have lived here. We believe in making a house a home. Danielle told me about your great-grandmother Clara May, how she and her husband stayed together through everything. The world threw at them. Love wasn't a feeling for them. It was a choice they made every day. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Carter, Miss Evelyn, I need to tell you something. The wedding Danielle is planning? That's not what I want. What do you want? I want something real. Something that brings our families together instead of keeping them apart. I want your blessing, not because I need permission, but because I want to be part of this family. The real family, not some version Danielle thinks she needs to create. I studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity. But all I saw was a young man who genuinely loved my daughter and was struggling to find his way through the complications she had created. What about your mother's expectations? My mother will adjust. She's more concerned with appearances than substance, but she raised me better than that. I know what matters, and what matters. Family, real family. The kind of people who show up when life gets hard, not just when everything's perfect. I poured him more tea and made my decision. Marcus, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. I can afford to help with this wedding. Not $25,000? But I could contribute something meaningful. His eyebrows raised slightly. But I won't write a check for a party that's designed to exclude me or diminish my role in my daughter's life. If Danielle wants my help, she needs to want my presence. Really want it. I understand completely. Do you think you can help her understand that? I think I can help her remember who she really is, underneath all this pressure to be someone else. We talked for 2 more hours about family, about values, about the kind of marriage he wanted to build with my daughter. By the time he left, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. That evening, my phone rang. Mama? Danielle's voice was small, uncertain. Marcus told me he came to see you. He did. I'm sorry, Mama, I'm so sorry. Those words hung in the air between us, carried through phone lines from Charlotte to Atlanta, heavy with regret and something that sounded like the daughter I remembered. What are you sorry for, baby? I asked gently, for everything. For treating you like you don't matter. For being so caught up in trying to impress Marcus's family that I forgot about my own family. For asking you for money without asking for your advice or your opinion or your presence. I could hear tears in her voice. And my heart started to soften despite everything. Marcus helped me see what I've been doing, she continued. He told me about your conversation, about the house and the photographs, and how you talked about real family. Mama, I've been so stupid. You haven't been stupid, Danielle. You've been scared. Scared of what? I thought about my answer carefully. Scared that who you really are isn't good enough for the life you think you want. There was silence, then a shaky breath. Maybe you're right. Honey, let me tell you something your great-grandmother Clara May used to say. She said that when you try to be someone else to win approval, you lose twice. You lose the people who can't love the fake version, and you lose yourself in the process. I don't want to lose you, Mama, and I don't want to lose myself either. Then stop pretending to be someone you're not. But Marcus's mother, she has such high expectations. The country club, the expensive venue, all these society people who judge everything. I wanted to fit in. Baby, do you remember what I used to tell you when kids at school would tease you about our neighborhood or our old car? You said that people who judge you by what you have instead of who you are aren't worth impressing. And has that changed because you're older? No, ma'am. Marcus loves you for who you are, not for how well you can pretend to be someone else. If his family can't accept that, then maybe the problem isn't with you. He said something similar. He said he fell in love with the woman who told him stories about her grandmother, not someone trying to win social approval. Smart man. Mama, can I ask you something? Can I come home this weekend? Not to talk about money or wedding plans, but just to come home? My eyes filled with tears. Of course, baby. You never need an invitation to come home. I want to see the cedar box. I want you to tell me the stories I should have listened to at the engagement dinner. I want to understand where I come from so I know where I'm going. I'd like that very much. And Mama? I want to bring Marcus. I want him to see the real me, the one who grew up in that house with all those photographs and stories. I want him to understand my family the way I understand his. He's welcome any time. There's something else. About the wedding, I waited, not sure what to expect. I want to cancel the venue. The expensive one? It's not us, and it's not what I really want. What do you want? I want to get married at Mount Olive Baptist, where you and Daddy got married, where you were baptized, where our family has worshipped for generations. I want Pastor Williams to perform the ceremony. I want the reception in the fellowship hall with food that means something, not fancy catering that tastes like nothing. My heart swelled with pride and relief. That sounds beautiful, baby. Will you help me plan it? Really plan it, not just pay for it? I want your ideas, your opinions, your presence in every part of it. I would be honored. I love you, Mama. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember what that really means. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of relief and joy. My daughter was coming home, not just physically, but emotionally. She was ready to remember who she was and where she came from. Saturday morning. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, made a grocery list for all of Danielle's favorite foods, and carefully arranged the contents of the cedar box on the dining room table. Each item had a story, and I was finally going to have the chance to share them. When I heard the car pull into my driveway, I looked out the window to see Danielle getting out of the passenger side while Marcus retrieved luggage from the trunk. She looked different somehow, more relaxed, more like herself. I opened the door before they could knock, and Danielle fell into my arms like she used to when she was small and had scraped her knee or had a bad dream. I missed you. Mama, she whispered. I missed you too, baby. So much. Marcus waited respectfully until we finished our embrace, then stepped forward with that same genuine smile I remembered from his visit. Miss Evelyn, thank you for having us. Thank you for bringing my daughter home. We spent the afternoon in my living room, surrounded by photographs and memories. I told them about Clara May's journey from rural Georgia to Atlanta, about the necklace she made by hand, and the strength she showed during the hardest times. I showed them Ruth's Bible, with notes written in the margins during civil rights meetings. I shared stories about my own childhood, about the lessons that had shaped me into the woman I became. Danielle held Clara May's wedding rings in her palm, tears streaming down her face. These rings survived everything, she said. The depression, discrimination, everything. And they're still beautiful. Love that's real doesn't break under pressure, I told her. It gets stronger. Marcus took her hand. That's the kind of marriage I want with you. The kind that gets stronger, not weaker, when life gets difficult. That evening, we sat around my kitchen table eating mac and cheese and cornbread, planning a wedding that would honor both families and celebrate love in its truest form. For the first time in months, my house felt complete. The next 2 months flew by in a whirlwind of wedding planning that actually felt like joy instead of stress. Danielle drove down from Charlotte every other weekend, sometimes bringing Marcus, sometimes coming alone to spend mother-daughter time that we both had missed. We met with Pastor Williams about the ceremony, and his face lit up when Danielle explained her decision to marry at Mount Olive instead of some fancy venue. Child, I baptized you in this church when you were 12 years old, he said, his voice warm with affection. It would be my honor to marry you here where your roots run deep. The church ladies rallied around us like family should. Sister Morrison volunteered to coordinate the flowers from her garden. Mrs. Jefferson offered to make her famous pound cake for the reception. The younger women in the congregation stepped forward to help with decorations and setup. This is what community looks like, I told Danielle as we sat in the fellowship hall, surrounded by women who had known her since she was in pigtails. This is what you've been missing in Charlotte. She nodded, looking around at the familiar faces. I forgot how good it feels to be somewhere people love you for who you are, not what you can do for them. Marcus fit into our community like he'd been born to it. He helped Mr. Watson set up tables, listened respectfully to the older men's advice about marriage, and even joined the choir for Sunday service practice. Watching him made my heart full in ways I hadn't expected, but not everything was smooth sailing. 3 weeks before the wedding, Danielle's phone rang during one of our planning sessions. She glanced at the screen and her face tightened. "It's Marcus's mother," she said quietly. "Answer it, baby. You can't avoid her forever." Danielle put the phone on speaker, and Lydia's voice filled my kitchen, sharp with disapproval. "Danielle, dear, I've been trying to reach you for days. We need to discuss the situation with the venue." "What situation, Mrs. Reed?" "Darling, I understand you want to honor your family traditions, but we simply cannot have the wedding at some little neighborhood church. What will people think? The Hamptons are expecting an elegant affair, and the Weatherbys specifically asked about the location." I watched my daughter's face, looking for signs that she might waver under the pressure. Instead, I saw her spine straighten with a strength I recognized from generations of Carter women. "Mrs. Reed, with all due respect, this is my wedding. Marcus and I have decided to get married at Mount Olive Baptist Church, and that decision is final." "But sweetheart, think about the photographs. Think about the guest list. How can we possibly accommodate everyone in some tiny church?" "We're not trying to accommodate everyone. We're inviting the people who matter to us, who love us, who want to celebrate our marriage instead of judging our choices." There was silence on the other end. Then Lydia's voice came back colder than before. "I see. And what about the reception? Please tell me you're not planning some church basement affair with paper plates." "The reception will be in the fellowship hall, and it will be beautiful because it will be filled with love." "Danielle, I'm very disappointed. Marcus is my only son, and I had hoped his wedding would reflect the family's standing in the community." Marcus, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "Mother, the wedding will reflect our values and our love for each other. If that doesn't meet your standards, then maybe you need to examine what your standards are really based on." Marcus Allen Reed, "I cannot believe you're speaking to me this way. I'm speaking to you honestly, which is what you taught me to do. You also taught me to treat people with respect, regardless of their bank account or social status. Danielle's family has shown me more genuine warmth in 2 months than some of your country club friends have shown in 20 years. I felt a surge of pride for the young man my daughter was marrying. "Fine," Lydia said, her voice clipped. "If this is how you want to start your marriage against your family's wishes, then so be it. But don't expect me to pretend to be happy about it." "I don't expect you to pretend anything, Mrs. Reed," Danielle said calmly. "I just expect you to love your son enough to support his happiness." After Lydia hung up, we sat in silence for a moment. "That went better than I expected," Marcus said finally. "Better?" Danielle looked at him in surprise. She didn't threaten to boycott the wedding. That's progress. Despite everything, we all started laughing. "Your mama's going to come around," I told Marcus. "Once she sees how happy you are, once she sees what real family looks like, she'll understand. And if she doesn't, then that's her loss, not yours." The week before the wedding, Danielle moved back home temporarily to handle the final preparations. It felt like having my little girl back, the one who used to help me cook dinner and tell me about her dreams while we folded laundry together. "Mama," she said one evening, as we addressed the last of the invitations, "I need to apologize for something else." "What's that, baby?" "For making you feel like you had to choose between supporting my dreams and keeping your dignity. You should never have been put in that position. Water under the bridge now. No, it's not. What I did was wrong, and I need to own that. You raised me better, and I forgot everything you taught me about respect and family and what really matters." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You remembered when it counted. That's what matters now. I keep thinking about what would have happened if Marcus hadn't gone to see you, if you hadn't stood your ground. I might have married him in some expensive venue, surrounded by people who don't really know us. Having borrowed money, I couldn't pay back to impress people whose opinions shouldn't matter. But that's not what happened. Because you were brave enough to tell me the truth, even when it was hard to hear. That's what mothers do, baby. We love you enough to hold you accountable." She squeezed my hand. "I want to be that kind of mother someday." The kind who raises children, who know their worth, who remember where they come from, who choose love over appearances. You will be. You've got Carter women in your blood. We don't raise weak children. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the journey that had brought us to this point. 4 months ago, I had driven 8 hours to Charlotte carrying a box of family treasures, hoping to share our history with my daughter. I had been rejected, dismissed, treated like an inconvenience. Now, those same treasures sat on my dining room table, waiting to be incorporated into a wedding that would honor our past while celebrating our future. Clara May's rings would be part of the ceremony. Her beaded necklace would be Danielle's something old. The photographs would be displayed at the reception, telling the story of love that endures. Sometimes I thought, the longest journey is the one that brings you home. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with that special quality of light that makes everything look blessed. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat on my front porch watching the sun rise over Atlanta, thinking about all the mornings I had sat in this same spot, worrying about my relationship with Danielle. Mama, you're up early. Danielle appeared in the doorway. Already dressed in a robe, her hair in curlers, couldn't sleep. Too excited, I guess. She settled beside me on the porch swing. And we sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the neighborhood wake up. I'm nervous, she admitted. Good nervous or bad nervous? Good nervous. The kind that means something important is happening. At 9 o'clock, the house filled with women. Sarah arrived with her makeup kit, followed by Patricia from Birmingham, then the church ladies with armloads of flowers and enough food to feed an army. The energy was infectious, joyful in a way that expensive wedding planners could never manufacture. This is what your great-grandmother's wedding day probably felt like, I told Danielle as Sister Morrison pinned jasmine from her garden into her hair. Women gathering to celebrate love, to support each other, to make something beautiful together. Marcus called around noon, his voice bright with excitement. How's my bride doing? She's glowing, I told him. And nervous. And perfect. Tell her I can't wait to see her walking down that aisle. You tell her yourself. She's right here. I handed Danielle the phone and watched her face light up as she talked to her future husband. Love, real love, was written in every expression, every gesture. At 2 o'clock, we headed to the church. Danielle wore my wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly, with Clara May's necklace at her throat and her great-great-grandmother's rings ready to be exchanged. She looked like a bride, but more than that, she looked like herself. Mount Olive was packed. Our community had turned out in force, but I was surprised to see several cars with North Carolina plates in the parking lot. Marcus's family had come after all. As I walked Danielle down the aisle, I caught sight of Lydia in the 3rd row. She was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and when our eyes met, she smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. After the ceremony, as we gathered for pictures, she approached me. Mrs. Carter, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. This wedding is beautiful. More beautiful than anything I could have planned. You've given my son and your daughter something precious. What's that? A celebration of love instead of a performance for society. 6 months later, I received a call that made my heart skip with joy. Mama, I have news, Danielle said, her voice bubbling with the same excitement I remembered from her childhood. What is it, baby? We're having a baby. You're going to be a grandmother. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, overwhelmed with happiness. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. How are you feeling? Tired but happy. So happy, Mama. When are you due? October. And Mama, we've been talking about something. Marcus got offered a position with a law firm in Atlanta. We want to move back home before the baby comes. I couldn't speak for a moment. My daughter was coming home, really coming home. We want our children to grow up the way I did, she continued. With family close by, with roots, with the kind of community that shows up for each other. Are you sure? What about your career in Charlotte? I can practice law anywhere, but I can't replace what we have here. What our children will have here. 3 months later, I helped them move into a house just 6 blocks from mine. The cedar box sat proudly on their dining room table, and Danielle had framed the photographs of our ancestors to hang in the nursery. I want this baby to grow up knowing where they come from, she told me, as we arranged Clara May's picture on the nursery wall. I want them to hear the stories from the beginning, not discover them years too late. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end. Sharing these stories means a lot to me, but it's your presence that makes them truly special. Let's meet again in the next one, okay? The baby arrived on a crisp October morning, a perfect little girl with Danielle's eyes and Marcus's gentle disposition. They named her Clara May Carter Reed, honoring our matriarchal line. As I held my granddaughter for the first time, I thought about the journey that had brought us all to this moment. The pain of that night in Charlotte, the courage it took to demand respect, the healing that followed when love was allowed to be real instead of performative. Thank you, Mama, Danielle whispered as I rocked little Clara May. For what? For not giving up on me, for loving me enough to hold me accountable, for teaching me that family isn't about money or status or impressing the right people. It's about showing up for each other, especially when it's hard. Looking down at my granddaughter's peaceful face, I knew that the stories would continue. The strength of Carter women would live on in this precious child, along with the lessons about love, dignity, and the courage to choose what matters over what looks good. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end. Sharing these stories means a lot to me, but it's your presence that makes them truly special. Let's meet again in the next one, okay? Sometimes the longest journey really is the one that brings you home. And sometimes, when you love someone enough to tell them the truth, you don't lose them. You save them.